This is just a quick intro before the stories start. As always, the stories will be narrated in a whisper with a black screen. Today's video consists of a compilation of true ghost stories that have been taken from Reddit. If you have any suggestions or any feedback, please do leave it in the comments, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't already. Okay, with that being said, let's sit back, relax, and dive into a world of whispers and chills. This happened when I was in college, living off campus in a place I really couldn't afford. It was an old Victorian house that had been chopped into 4 separate units. I had the top floor to myself, which sounds nice, but it wasn't. It was cramped, the ceiling sloped in weird places, and the insulation was garbage, but it was cheap and it gave me space. There was a big window in the hallway, right by my front door. It faced the street and sat above the porch roof, too high to climb onto, but low enough that sometimes birds would land there. I usually left the blinds half open. My second month there, I started waking up at weird times, always between 2 and 3 a.m. I'd be dead asleep and then just awake. Not from nightmares, just this weird, sudden awareness that something wasn't quite right. At first, I thought it was just stress or my messed up sleep schedule. But then one night, I woke up to what I thought was a reflection in the hallway window. From my bed, I could see through my bedroom doorway and out into the short hallway that led to my unit's door. That window at the end would sometimes catch the lights of passing cars. But this wasn't that. This was a person. There was a man standing on the porch roof, outside the hallway window. I shot up out of bed and crept closer to it to get a better look, heart in my throat, phone in my hand, ready to call someone. But by the time I got to the hallway and looked out, he was gone. No movement, just an empty room and a couple of dry leaves shifting in the wind. He was wearing an orange jacket. That detail stuck with me. I told myself it had to be a reflection, maybe from someone on the street walking by. But that didn't really add up, because the porch roof was too high for anyone to just appear in that window. You'd need a ladder, or a very bad idea. The next few nights, I started closing the blinds all the way. But even then, I'd sometimes get the same feeling, like I'd just missed something standing there, watching. A few weeks later, my downstairs neighbour, Jess, mentioned something weird over coffee. She said, "Do you ever hear footsteps above your place, like on the roof?" I hesitated and told her about the figure I saw. She got real quiet, then said, "I saw someone too, last night, standing on the porch roof, just still." We both brushed it off as maybe a squatter or drunk, but something about how she described it, it was too similar. Same orange jacket, same blank posture. 2 nights later, I stayed up, sat on the couch with my lights off, looking down the hall at the window. Around 2:40, I saw movement. The blinds were closed, but a shape pressed up against them from the outside. Slowly, deliberately, I froze. It was a hand. Just the faintest silhouette, like someone was standing directly on the outside of the glass, fingers splayed, not trying to open the window, just touching it. Then the shape moved, shifted sideways, and was gone. I threw the lights on, yanked open the blinds, nothing. Empty roof, dead quiet. The next morning, I talked to my landlord, told him someone might be climbing onto the roof and looking into the window. He seemed weirdly unfazed. He said, yeah, that window. You've got that haunted one." I thought he was joking, but he wasn't smiling. He told me that about a decade ago, jumped off that very roof. Witnesses said he paced for hours right behind that window, talking to himself. He wore a bright orange construction jacket. Apparently, the guy had lost his job and convinced himself someone was coming to take him away. Neighbours said he used to talk to things that weren't there, late at night, sometimes from the window. After the fall, no one saw anything for a while, but tenants over the years kept reporting the same thing. Someone on the roof, watching, just standing still. I asked him why he never fixed the access point, made it harder for people to get up there. He just shrugged and said, it's not really a physical problem. I moved out 3 weeks later. On my last night, as I packed, I decided to leave the blinds open one last time. I don't know why, maybe to prove to myself that it had all just been anxiety or paranoia. I left the lights off, sat on the floor, staring down the hallway, and at 3:02 a.m. he appeared, the man in the orange jacket, standing in the window. No face, no eyes I could see, just his shape, perfectly still. He didn't knock, didn't try to get in. He just stood there, facing me, like he was waiting to be seen. Then, slowly, he turned and walked off into nothing. No sound, no weight on the roof, just gone. I moved in with friends for a while after that, but sometimes, and I know this makes no sense, I'll pass a random window in a completely different part of town and catch a flash of orange in the reflection. Not bright, not obvious, but it's enough, and I never stop to check. This happened a few years ago when I was living with my sister Claire in a duplex on the edge of town. It wasn't a bad neighbourhood, just quiet. Older homes, big backyards, overgrown hedges between properties. Our place had 2 bedrooms, and mine looked out over the backyard, which stretched out into a little patch of woods. It wasn't deep, maybe a dozen trees before the brush thickened, but enough to feel cut off from the rest of the world at night. Claire worked night shifts at the hospital, so I was alone in the house a lot. I didn't mind, I liked the solitude. I could play music, paint, read, all without distraction. The first time I noticed something strange, it was subtle. I just finished a painting and walked into the kitchen to grab a drink. As I passed the hallway mirror, I saw something behind me, a shape moving past the living room doorway. I turned immediately. Nothing. No breeze, no light change, just empty space. I chalked it up to light reflections, or maybe just my mind playing tricks on me, but it kept happening. Almost every time I was alone at night, I'd catch a flicker of motion out of the corner of my eye, always near the living room. One evening, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I heard soft footsteps across the wood floor. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth. They weren't heavy, not like boots or someone stomping around. They were light, barefoot. I called out for Claire, no answer. I checked her room, empty as expected. She was on shift. So I went room by room with my phone flashlight, just to be safe. The place was exactly as it should be, nothing out of place, except the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. It was unlocked. I always locked it before bed. I'm borderline obsessive about it. The lock was flipped up, not broken, just open. Then things escalated. I started waking up to the sound of the hallway floor creaking, the kind of soft groan it made when someone shifted their weight walking through it. I'd lie still, barely breathing, listening as the steps stopped just outside my bedroom door. No knock, no sound after that, just stillness. The worst was the night I woke up and saw someone standing outside my window. My bed faces the backyard, and I leave the curtains cracked a little. I like moonlight coming in, it helps me sleep. That night, I woke up for no reason. Just opened my eyes and saw a figure standing by the tree line. Not close, shoulders sloped, just standing there. I didn't move, I just stared, for what felt like 5 minutes, and then she walked backwards into the woods. No stumble, no turn, just backwards, slow and smooth, into the dark. I didn't tell Claire at first. She already thought I was getting paranoid from being alone too much. But a few days later, she brought it up. She said, "Hey, did you have someone over the other night?" I said no. She looked at me carefully and said, "Because I got home at like 4 and I saw someone standing in the living room. I thought it was you, but when I went in, no one was there." I asked what the person looked like. Her answer, "You. It looked exactly like you." After that, I started sleeping with the hallway light on. Then came the mirror. We had this old mirror that hung in the hallway. One morning, I walked past it and felt this jolt of cold, like stepping into a freezer. I turned and looked, and for a second, the reflection didn't match my movement. I took a step back, and the version of me in the mirror just stood still, just stared, not mirroring anything. Then it caught up, like a video buffering, and everything was normal again. I ripped the mirror down that afternoon. The last night we ever saw her, Claire and I were both home. It was around 11 p.m. We were in the living room, lights low, watching a movie. No weird feelings, no creaks, just calm. Then the sliding glass door opened. It didn't slam, it just slid slowly, like someone was easing it along the track. We both turned at the same time. No one was there. We walked to the door together, and she was out there again, near the tree line, standing, watching, but her arms hung wrong, a little too far from the body, like she didn't know how they were supposed to sit. Her head tilted just slightly to the side, not curiosity, but like she was studying something behind the glass. Claire whispered, "Is that?" And I said, "Yes." We didn't move, and the figure slowly took a step forward, then another. That broke whatever tension was holding us still. I slid the door shut and locked it. Claire grabbed the house keys, and we left that night and slept at her boyfriend's place. 2 months later, we moved out, and never saw her again. I moved into a building in East Providence last year. One of those old brick complexes built in the 60s. 5 floors, no frills, mostly quiet tenants. Nothing flashy, just cheap rent and decent walls. My unit was on the 3rd floor, 3C, right across the hall from 3B. When I moved in, the super told me 3B was empty. Had been for a while. Still figuring out some paperwork, he said vaguely. The door had a layer of dust on it and rusting peephole cover, so I ignored it. That first week, nothing felt off. I unpacked, sat on my little desk in the living room, and started getting used to the traffic sounds at night. Then on my 5th night, something odd happened. I came back from a late grocery run, and as I was unlocking my door, I heard a soft sound behind me, like the latch of a door being released. I turned. 3B's door was slightly open, just a sliver, but I was sure it had been shut the night before. There was no light coming from the inside. I waited a second, thinking maybe the super had finally been inside, but no one came out. No footsteps, nothing. I watched it for a full minute before slowly going into my unit and closing the door. That should have been it, just a weird moment. But over the next 2 weeks, things got stranger. I'd hear light knocks on my door around 3 or 4 a.m. Never forceful, just 1 or 2 taps. When I looked through the peephole, the hallway was always empty. Twice, I noticed the door to 3B was slightly open again. Never wide, just enough that the shadow inside looked like it was waiting for someone to speak first. One night, I stayed up, sitting quietly on the floor by my door around 2:30. I had my phone in hand. I didn't move, just waited. At 3:17, there was a knock. I looked through the peephole, no one. But when I glanced at 3B's door, it was wide open. And I swear to God, for half a second, I saw someone standing behind the window in that unit. The one that faced the parking lot. Just the silhouette of a woman, shoulder-length hair, arms resting at her sides. Just there. I blinked, and she was gone. The hallway was quiet again. I left a note for the super the next day, asking if 3B had new tenants. He slipped a reply under my door that said, "Still vacant. Haven't been inside since October. Maybe someone broke in. I'll check." But the door never changed. Still slightly ajar sometimes. Still does there. No signs of forced entry. No new tenants. A week later, the upstairs neighbour, this older woman named Anna, stopped me in the stairwell and said, "Hey, has anyone moved into 3B? I've heard someone crying in there, like every night this week. Thought it was your TV." I didn't know what to say. That night, I sat near my window and stared across the building, across the parking lot. You could see the windows in our complex reflected in the glass. Just after 2 a.m, I saw her again, in 3B's window. She was staring straight ahead, not out the window, not toward me, but facing an invisible figure in the room with her, standing perfectly still. I couldn't see her face, just the shape of her, and her head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something. The next morning, I had to know. I knocked on 3B's door. No answer. I tried the knob. It turned, but stopped. Chain lock. Someone had engaged it from the inside. But the place was supposed to be empty. I bent down and peered through the mail slot, the kind with the little flap. What I saw still messes with my head. There was a chair, old, wooden, placed directly in the middle of the living room, facing the door, like someone had been sitting there, but no one was there. Except, on the floor beside the chair, I could see faint scuff marks, the kind you'd expect if someone had been pacing in a tight circle, over and over, wearing the same shoes. That night, I couldn't settle, not from fear, but something worse, dread, a kind that settled in my gut. Around 2:50, I heard something new, not knocking, whispering, right outside my door. A woman's voice, slow, not in English, low and repetitive, like a chant or a prayer. When I finally dared look through the peephole, 3B's door was wide open again. But the voice, it stopped, and for a moment, I felt like someone was standing right on the other side of the wood, waiting for me to open it. I never did. I never even reported it again. The super left, got replaced, and no one's ever mentioned 3B since. But here's what really bothers me. Last week, while I was coming back from work, I passed a new neighbour moving in 2 floors down. She was signing something with the new super. I overheard her ask if there had ever been any deaths in the building. He said, "Only one, back in '03, a woman in 3B. She overdosed in the chair facing the door. Neighbours didn't smell anything for 3 days." He said it casually like it was trivia. But I've lived here for a year, and there's no one in 3B. Not officially anyway. But some nights, I still hear the latch, unlatch, and the crying. I've never really believed in ghosts. I grew up Catholic, but the whole spirit stuck on earth thing never made sense to me. If I heard a weird noise, I assumed it was plumbing. If a door moved, it was a draft. I never wanted to be one of those people who saw faces in shadows and built a story around it. But I think I saw a ghost. It happened in 2022. I just moved into a small rental house outside Akron. was nothing special. Beige siding, patchy lawn, a weird little wooden shed in the backyard with a warped roof and a door that didn't fully close. The landlord said I could use it for storage, but I ended up just leaving it alone. Something about it felt stale, like it held on to old air. The first month was uneventful. I worked from home doing graphic design, so I didn't meet many neighbours, aside from a woman 2 doors down who waved when she walked her dog. The guy next door had a motion sensor light in his backyard that kept going off at night, which he blamed on raccoons. One Saturday night, around 11:30 p.m, I went out back for a smoke. It had rained earlier and the grass squished under my shoes. I leaned against the porch railing and stared at the shed. There was someone standing next to it. A man. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the shed, like he was reading something on it. He wore an old, dark jacket, the kind you'd find in a surplus store, heavy looking, with folds that didn't move in the breeze. I froze. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbour, but that made no sense. The yards were fenced off from each other, and mine had a latch you could hear from inside. I hadn't heard anything. I didn't say anything, I just watched him. He didn't turn around, didn't shift his weight or look over his shoulder. He was maybe 6 feet tall, average build. I couldn't make out his face. He was angled slightly toward the shed, and the porch light only lit part of him. But something about how still he was felt wrong. I slowly stepped back inside and locked the door. For the next 10 minutes, I watched through the back window, but he never moved. Eventually, I turned away, unsure of what I'd seen, thinking maybe it had been a shadow, maybe even a neighbour who had cut through the yard and paused for a weird reason. I told myself anything to make it fit. The next morning, I went out to check. No footprints in the soft ground, not even by the shed. I circled it once, opened the door just a little. Nothing inside but a rake and a warped lawn chair left by the last tenant. I closed it again, harder this time, until it clicked. A week passed, and I started to forget about it. Until the motion light next door kept going off. Not just once or twice, but almost every night. Same hour, between 11:15 and midnight. Always a single click, then off, sometimes twice. The neighbour asked if I had a cat. I told him no. 2 nights later, I stayed up editing a project. Around 11:45, I stepped into the kitchen to grab a drink. From the window over the sink, I could just see the edge of the shed, and there he was again. Same man, same jacket, same position, but this time he wasn't facing the shed. He was facing the house. I dropped the glass in the sink. It didn't break, but the clatter sounded too loud. I stepped back. I didn't go outside. I didn't want to see more. I didn't sleep that night. When the sun came up, I finally went to check. Again, no prints, and this time the shed door was slightly ajar, even though I'd made sure it closed fully. I asked the landlord a few days later if anyone had ever lived in the shed, or maybe used it for something before. He was quiet for a second, longer than I liked, then said, "There was a tenant back in 2007 who used to work on cars back there, but he passed away. Nothing weird. Heart attack." I asked if he'd ever seen anyone out back. He said, "No one who was supposed to be there." I didn't press. After that, I started avoiding the backyard. I didn't even open the curtains on that side of the house after dark. I bought blackout fabric for the kitchen window, and I started smoking in the garage instead. But about 2 months after the second sighting, I got up in the middle of the night to pee. The hallway light was out. I hadn't changed the bulb, so I navigated by the dim nightlight into the bathroom. When I turned the corner, I saw someone standing by the sliding glass doors in the kitchen. Just standing there. I stopped walking. My mouth went dry. It was the same man inside the house. He was backlit faintly by the neighbour's motion light, which had clicked on again. But the sliding door was locked. There was no sound, no movement. I stared at him for maybe 3 full seconds, and then he was gone. Not walked out, not turned, just gone. I stood there until the neighbour's motion light blinked off. Then I backed into the bathroom and closed the door. I didn't come out again until the sun was up. I've only seen him once since, faintly across the yard, maybe 5 weeks ago. He was standing at the very edge of the tree line behind the house, barely visible through the branches, watching the shed. Not me, not the house, the shed. I don't go near it anymore. I've considered moving, but something tells me it wouldn't matter. Whatever I saw, whoever that man is, I think he's tied to that place. Not the structure, not the house, just the yard. That patch of grass and soil that maybe remembers him when no one else does. And the weirdest part is, sometimes I feel like he's not even trying to scare me. It feels more like he's waiting, like he expects something, like I'm supposed to do something, and he's just being patient